All right, section 9.3, getting into angles, right? And we're eventually building up, getting into um, our most basic shape of triangle. But today we're going to talk about angles. We'll learn how to measure and draw them, how to name them, how to classify them, and some key terms that we need to know. An angle is formed by two rays, right, which are the sides that have the same endpoint, right? And you see an example over here. So here's a ray, right, has an endpoint and then keeps going on in the other direction. This point, this common point right here, is called the vertex. That's like the corner of it. And when we measure an angle, we're looking at what is this measurement right here. And the vertex is always the corner, right? And that's a common or very important point when naming angles as well. So let's look at how we name an angle. First off, we use the angle symbol, looks like this, right? It just looks like an angle. And one way to do it is name it using the points, right? So right here we have point A, B, and C. So I could call that angle A, B, C, right? And if I were to draw between those points, right, you can see that it makes up that angle. I could also call it CBA, right? I could go from C to B to A, and it still forms that angle. Now, since you can see there's just a single angle right here, I can also just use the vertex, angle B, and I know that it's referring to this angle right here because there's only one angle that's created. You'll also see them insert numbers right here, so I could call that angle 1, right, as the reference there. Now, some that I cannot use, right? I could not say B, A, C, right? Because if I were to draw that, let me use a different color here. I'm going to use green, right? If I went B, A, C, right, you can see this talking about that angle. It's not referring to this right here. So we can't do that. The vertex has to be in the middle when we're using 3 points. When there's multiple angles, you can see that, for example, I have angle ABC, right, which refers to this angle right here. Let me use a different color. I have angle ABD, right? So if I do A, B, and come down there, right, it's referring to that larger angle. And we also have, we could say angle CBD, right, from CBD, that refers to just this angle right there. So there's 3 angles involved, which means I can't say angle B when there's multiple angles there because I don't know if it's referring to this little green one, this little purple, or this large angle that consists of both of them. All right, so that's only when there's a single angle. Now you might see where they'll say this is angle 1 and this is angle 2. And so ABC would be angle 1 and CBD would be angle 2, right? And just a reminder, I could reverse these letters, right? I could also say CBA, right? And these two are referring to the same one. But notice again, the vertex has to be in the middle when labeling. Now, the different types of angles that we have, and you'll hear of other angles as you go through, but these are the ones we're going to look at. We measure our angles in degrees, okay? And that's probably the only unit of measure you've learned so far. But there is another one called radians. And again, as you go on in your math classes, you'll be introduced to that. And radians are more for circles. We're looking at angles of shapes, which are measured in degrees. So first of all, an angle that is more than 0 but less than 90 we call acute. All right, so it can't be 0, all right, but it could be anything bigger than that. So if I have my angle, and let's just call it angle A, right? To be acute, my angle's acute, it has to be bigger than 0 but less than 90. Okay, cannot equal 0, cannot equal 90. So 1 degree is acute, 2 degrees is acute, blah, blah, blah. 89 degrees is acute. All right. As soon as we get to 90, that's called a right angle, right? And it's measured or it's denoted with that little corner symbol right there. Perpendicular is another term for that, but that is a right angle. It's only 90 degrees, cannot be anything else, right? If it's 89.9, it's acute. If it's 90.1, it's more than 90, right, which we call obtuse. So let's call that obtuse angle. Has to be less than 180 and it has to be greater than 90. So 91 is obtuse, 92 is obtuse, 179 is obtuse, but as soon as I get to 180, that's a straight line. Okay. Some other terms you might hear is complete angle, and that is just all the way around, right? Which, if you look, if I were to draw a straight line, right, I have a half circle here, which is 180, and another half circle over here, which would be 180, right? And a complete circle is 360 degrees. And that's kind of where these angles come from. And I'll start here. We don't really use a circle um, in our measurements, but this is where the angles come from, right? So if I start here at 0, right, with this as my vertex, right, so I have this 0, and then if I go up this way, right, this angle would be 10, right, it's getting bigger, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. As soon as I get up here, right, we have this corner, which is 90 degrees, right, and I keep rotating around. These are all obtuse, and then I get to 180, and that's where my straight angle is, right? So the reason we study using protractor or 180 degrees is because if I keep going, right, let's say that I go over here. Let me get some of these lines out of here. Let's say that I'm going to draw a 240 degree angle. So if I go like this here, and then here's 240, right? Let's pretend this is so 240 would be going this way around to get to 240. However, if I were just to change directions and go this way, there's 90, there would be 100, there's 110, there's 120. So I could go 120 in the other direction. So that's why we really only need the values between 0 and 180 when we're doing our measurements. It's just a reference angle. So if we scroll down here, this is what we use as the protractor, and you can see that that's just right. If I were to take out this bottom part here, we're just using the top part of the protractor, which are these angles here, right? Because if I wanted to measure down here, I could just flip it down and go this way to measure. So when we measure, we're going to be using a protractor. So let's draw some of these angles, right? So first off, I want to start, and I'll do this angle going this way, and I'll show you how to use the protractor. So this is my initial ray here, and I'm going to go this way, right, when I'm drawing this angle. So I start 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, right, all the way around, and I need to get, there's 120, there's 130, so right in between there is 125. So if I draw that line down to my vertex, this angle right here is 125 degrees. Now, you see that there's two numbers here, right? When I'm going this way, I use those top values. If I wanted to draw 125 going the other way, so here's my 0, pretend that's straight. I would go this way using the bottom numbers, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, right, all the way over. Here's 125, and this would be my angle of 125. So depending on the direction, and it doesn't matter which one you use when you're drawing, depending on the direction, um, would be whether you use the top or the bottom row of numbers, right? And you should be able to identify, which we'll practice, obtuse and acute. So I'm going to erase those out of there, right? We'll do another one. Let's do 35 degrees, right? And I'll do it from this way. So there's my initial line, right, coming into my vertex, and then 35, so 10, 20, 35 right here, right? I can see the 35, I'm using the top, that's an acute angle. Now notice if I were to use the 35 over here, right, that would give me this big old obtuse angle. So I know that that's not the correct one. I have to draw an acute, right? So I'm using those top values. Let's draw another one here. Let's draw 90, right? So it doesn't matter with 90, right? That's right in the middle. You'll see that's the only one that only has one measure, because if I go this way, I get to 90. If I go this way, I get to 90. It's the same angle, right? And we can use the right angle symbol to show that that is 90 degrees. Now, typically when you measure, you go to the one that's nearest 5 degrees. So if you're off by a couple degrees when you're measuring, that's completely understandable. And if we have to draw an angle that is kind of this weird number, right, 57, right? So I'll go from this direction here. So 57, so I know it's acute, right, because it's less than 90, so it's going to be over here. So here's 50, here's 60. You can see that these little lines right here, so there's 55, 56, 57's this one. So if I just draw my line down, right, and typically what you'll do is you'll put on your protractor, there'll be a hole here, you put a dot, right, you put a dot here, there's your first line, and then you would just mark right here, and then you could take a ruler and connect, right? Obviously I can't do that because I'm working on the computer here. We're just getting the idea of how to do that. Now, measuring angles, all right? I'm going to give the in-person students some protractors to use. If you're at home, you'll have to do your best to estimate. But what I do is when I'm measuring an angle, so in red here you can see the angle. So what I do is I put this little circle here on the vertex, and there's a line that rolls along the bottom, right? And I put that on the initial ray, so you can see that that's at 0. And then I'm going to measure, where does this end up here? So again, it's acute, so I'm using these bottom values. So it looks like it's between 40 and 50. I would say that that is 45 degrees. Okay, here. So here's my initial line, right, to the vertex. So I'm going this way, right? I'm measuring this way off my initial line, and it's obtuse, right? So I'm going here, and it is right on the 110. So that is my 110 degree angle, right? This one has it going initial on the other side, right? Starting at 0, I'm going this way, and that one gets me up to, right? And if I look, it's between 80 and 100, right? I know this is an acute angle. It's less than 90, so I'm going to use the 80 degree there. Right here, this one's obtuse. Right? I'm still using this, right? 10, 20, I get to 90. Now I become obtuse. And it looks like there's 150. That one would be on 160 degrees. All right. So on 9.3, I'm going to have you practice the following problems, right? If you have a protractor, try to use that to measure the ones that ask you to measure the angles. And the ones that have you draw the angles, you don't have to be exact if you don't have a protractor, right? Just be an approximate on there. But you make sure you want to know how to name acute, right, obtuse, and straight angles. All right. If you have questions, let me know. We'll talk to you soon.